Good morning everyone. Today we are going to learn about 9th standard science and our topic is pressure in fluids, right? So let's have some recap of what have we done till now. Okay, so for every solid substance, we know that every solid substance apply pressure on the surface on which it stands due to its weight, right? जैसे कि this ball, right? It applies a force depending upon its weight onto my palm. It is applying some kind of pressure on my palm, right? Due to its weight, right? As us, we have our weight, right? Due to our weight, we are applying some kind of force or pressure on the ground, right? So this is the talk about solid substance. But what about fluid substance like liquids and gases? Does liquids and gases apply pressure on whatever the substance, right? Yes, they do. How? See, I have taken water in this beaker, right? How is possible that this water is applying pressure, right? So you can see that the water is applying pressure. How? That water inside this beaker is applying pressure onto the surface, or we can say in the wall of this container, every side of this container. At the bottom it is applying pressure downwards, and on the wall, every side of the wall, the water is applying pressure on the walls, right? So okay, so there is another example, right? That how do we check the pressure into the tube of the tire, right, of any of the vehicle, right? So does it mean that fluid applies pressure? Yes, fluid, just ki air, also applies pressure. But how? On what? Just ki fluid is not standing like a solid substance, right? Fluid is fluid, right? Its name is fluid because it flows, right? So how do we measure the pressure applied by any fluid onto its container, right? Let's see. So suppose that this is the tube of any tire, and here the valve, which we call it, right? From here the air is blown inside, right? And when this lid of that valve is closed, the air inside it, the air which is inside that tube applies pressure on the tube's walls, right? Just like this, the air inside the tube applies pressure on the walls of that tube, right? And that is measured by the pressure meter, right? If you have gone to any of the working station of the vehicle, right? Any of the mechanics have tried to measure the pressure of the tire, right? So that is how it is measured, right? The measurement of the pressure is the measurement of the pressure that is inside the air which is applying on the walls of the tube. That is how it is measured, right? Okay, so according to that we are going to perform a activity, right? So let's see. As I told you guys that we are going to perform an activity, but before going to do that, we are going to see that if have you ever tried to swim into the water? Have you gone into the water ever, right? So if you have gone to into the water, so you would feel your weight has become lighter when you enter the water, right? And if you have collected water from a well with the help of a bucket, right? Have you ever felt that when the bucket is into the water of the well, it has become heavier when it was outside the water, right? So that means that that is some kind of a force that is applied when it is inside any other fluid, right? So that is our cue for today, right? So here we are going to see that if this ball, which is of plastic, gets into this water, or it floats, or what happens if we try to take this plastic bottle and try it to submerge it, right? Let's see what happens. So obviously, because it is of plastic, if we want to predict that what will happen to it, it will sink or it will float. So obviously it is going to be floating, right? As you can see, it is floating, right? But what will happen that if I try to submerge it into the water? Let's see, we have to apply some force into it, right? So let's apply force with our bare hands if we can. So if you see, so to exactly perform and to feel it, you have to do it yourself, right? So do it, simple as that, simple, कुछ है नहीं, करना क्या है, just this ball you have to push it downwards, right, to submerge it obviously into the water. So when you are applying force into this plastic ball, you will feel a force that is applied by water onto that ball upwards, right, which is opposite direction of the force that you are applying on that ball, right? And that force increases as you push more into the water to that particular ball. मतलब क्या हुआ कि जैसे जैसे आप उस बॉल को अंदर की तरफ धकेलते जाओगे, the force that is applied onto the ball by water also increases. It will continue to increase till you reach to the bottom of the beaker, right? Okay. But it will not sink as any stone or any heavy objects sinks into the water, right? But what if we want to make this ball submerged into the water? You would say that make holes into this plastic ball so that water goes into it and it becomes heavier, right? Let's do that. Okay, so let's do that. I have a pin over here, right, and I'm going to make holes into it so that water gets away. So before, when we have not made holes into that ball, we could say that because the plastic ball had air inside that wasn't sinking. But now, as I have made many holes into it, water has gone into it, right? Water has made a way to get inside that bottle, but still you can see that water is inside this bottle, the ball. This is not sinking, right? Even if the ball is filled with water, right? The ball is overly filled with this water, this ball will not sink inside the water, right? So here the question is, if the water is inside that plastic ball, why isn't it sinking, right? So let's see, let's talk about it, right? So what is the reason behind it? The reason behind that this ball is not getting submerged into that water is the force applied by water, right? The force applied by water is more than this plastic ball is applying onto the water by its weight, right? So the weight of this substance, whatever we are calling it, a plastic ball, is less than the water is applying on this plastic ball, right? That is why even if this ball is filled with water, right, because always also the water is outside and water is inside, that becomes similar thing, right? But the thing that is plastic ball made up of plastic, which is applying force down to the earth, right, is less, and the force which is applied by water onto this plastic ball is greater because of the density of the both thing, right? The density of water is greater than the plastic which is made of plastic which is used to make this ball, right? So if we want to make this ball sink into the water, we have to make this ball filled with the material that is having more density than water. What we have to do? We have to make this ball filled with sand, right? Now now we are going to see that if any object is floating on the surface of the water, or it sinks into the surface of the water. Okay, so for that I have arranged a beaker filled with water, and I have arranged a cork, and I have over here is a drawing pen, right? We try to put these two things into the surface of the water. Okay, so let's put both of these together onto the water, right? Obviously we will see that this pin will sink into the water, but we have to see what happens to this cork. It floats or it sinks, right? Let's see. So as you see that cork, when I am applying force on it, it is not sinking, but the pin you see is still sinked into the water. As we saw that when we try to put these two things into the water, you saw that drawing pin sank and the cork is still floating. Does it mean that the upward thrust which is force applied by the water is not applying on this cork and it is only applied on the drawing pen? No. The upward thrust of the water, the force by which water applies on each and every substance, is applied on every substance. It is also applied on that pin, and it is also applied on this cork. The thing is, the dependency of any object, that if it will sink or it will float on the surface of the water, depends on the density of the substance, right? Now what is the density of the substance? Density of the substance is mass per unit volume, right? मतलब कि अगर हम बात करें इसके वॉल्यूम की, right, the density, right, the density of this cork is less than the water, right? मतलब क्या होगा कि डेंसिटी जो है, right, वो वाटर की ज़्यादा है, किसकी? इससे ज़्यादा है। कॉर्क की डेंसिटी जो भी है वो वाटर से कम है. That is why it floats on the surface of the water, which means that the force applied by water on this cork is greater than the force applied by this cork onto the surface of the water. That is why it is floating. In case of that pin, the density of that pin is greater than the density of the water, which also means that the force applied by that pin onto the surface of the water is greater than the force applied by water on the pin. That is why that pin sinks into the water. That is it. So if you want to see that which material or which object will it sink or will it float, then you have to see what is the density of that particular object. If the density of the particular object is greater than the density of water, it will obviously sink into the water. But if the density of that particular object is less than water, it will float like this cork. So that's it.